Hey, this is Laura, and this is Count Time Podcast. My co host Justin will be joining us in just a few minutes, but we have a very special guest, Senator McKinney of District 11, Omaha, Nebraska. Senator, would you like to introduce yourself and what got you started in politics?
Sure. So, good afternoon, everyone, or how y'all doing? My name is Terrell McKinney. I'm a state senator in the Nebraska State Legislature, representing District 11, which is in North Omaha. I've been in the legislature for 2 years now. It's been a great experience. And what drove me to run for office, honestly, was that I felt like there were a lot of issues that weren't being addressed in my community that, I thought needed to be addressed. And with Senator Chambers leaving the legislature, I knew that if someone from my generation didn't step up, there would probably be a void in what is needed and what is not needed for the district. And that's what drove me to step up. One of the biggest things I wanted to focus on was economic justice and opportunity. And then there's criminal justice reform. And criminal justice reform, because for my whole life, I've dealt with the criminal justice system, whether it was a family member or a friend going in and out of the system or dealing with the system, even myself, being arrested before. So it's something that has always been near and dear to my heart. It's something that I've been fighting for in the legislature since I've been there.
Wow, yeah, and you've put forward some really remarkable bills. I know this session has been quite a roller coaster, and I've certainly been on the edge of my seat for sure. And one of them I'd really like to chat about with you would be LB 1024. Could you give us kind of a summary of that and what got the ball rolling for you, all that information?
So LB 1024, which was introduced by Senator Wayne, and I sponsored it. It was a bill that we had worked on pretty much the whole interim, trying to figure out how can we put together a plan to take advantage of the opportunity that we have as a state from the American Rescue Plan Act and those resources. And we tried to look at every plan that was ever introduced and meet as many people as possible in the community that had an idea to try to figure out what do we need and what do we need to put in our plan to address those needs. And we did that, and our initial ask was for $450 million.
Mm-hmm.
And, initially people were like, are you guys asking for too much, or, or are we just trying to like money grab or whatever? But it really wasn't that. It was more so when you look at the needs in the community and you look at it from a historical lens and a holistic lens, $450 million isn't a big ask.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you really dive deep into where the money would go and how it would be used, we didn't view it as a big ask. And, we wanted to focus on economics. Number one, how can we support small businesses and business growth in North Omaha? Two is housing. How can we, boost home ownership, but also help preserve the homes that are here and help those that are homeowners be able to fix up their homes. Next was, how can we attract businesses to come to North Omaha? And we have this airport area that it's been a plan to develop for probably over a decade, but no one has ever put the money towards it. And we were like, okay, this is our shot to take advantage of this opportunity and use some money to develop that area so we can have potentially, hypothetically, a Google in North Omaha, a link on Amazon, just thinking outside the box. Because a lot of the times when we talk to people about why don't you relocate to North Omaha, it's like we don't have the space, or we don't have the land that's ready for us to come in and be able to develop. So that's something we want to do, because if we don't have jobs and we're not decreasing poverty and we're not addressing, root issues, we'll continue to see the, disproportionate representation of our community inside of our criminal justice system here in this state. So that's probably the biggest focus for us, is how can we improve the community in the best way possible and be intentional about it, because we don't want to just get a bunch of money and then 5 years down the line it was just a bunch of money appropriated and nobody knows where it went or how it was used. So we're trying to do our best to try to be as intentional as possible. and putting money in the right places so it can work for the community for the long term.
Yeah, and this bill certainly would do that. I'm very excited to see as it progresses. We've been keeping a close watch on it for sure. And I would argue that it's not enough money. I don't think that it's a money grab, and I don't think
I
you're
know
overestimating. Yeah, I really think
somebody
I would
asked
have.
that. Somebody
Yeah,
asked, like, do you think you're asking for? I was like, honestly, we probably should ask for more, but we're trying to be reasonable here.
this is the happy median. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I mean, for anyone who has been serving time, has gotten out, I want to say the rate is 80% of those who then have a job after re-entering into the community, they don't reoffend. Um, they don't break parole. They have the resources. As long as they have a livable wage, it's I think it's about 80% don't go back. So really investing those resources and the time and attention needed for those communities, especially to help support that. And we're just going to resolve a lot of the problems in the community itself. But then I know there's also discussion in building another prison in the area and the funds for that, when actually it's less expensive to help the base root problems than it would be to then incarcerate even more people. It's grossly disproportionate, but then it almost would encourage that tendency to continue. So I'm very excited to hear about the bill. I think it's great.
Thank you. And that's a big thing for me as well. Even with, having discussions with the governor, I've told him to his face, I know you want to build a prison for $200+ million, but if you invested that same amount of money into North Omaha, you decrease, in my opinion, I think you decrease the need for a prison. I wouldn't say money cures all, but I would say it will go a long way, honestly.
It'll help. Yeah,
And,
you're right.
keeping people out and making sure that when they do get out, they can come home to a community that's vibrant. A lot of times, people talk about the recidivism rate and how people keep going back. What are they coming out to? They spend X amount of years in prison. They get out, you give them $100 check and send them back to the same environment where you have not invested in, and you expect different results. That it makes no sense. It's logical that a good portion of those people will reoffend or get a technical violation or something, because what are they going back to? We're not making sure that when people get out of prison that they have housing, a livable wage job, transportation, we're not meeting the basic needs, but we want to continue to be punitive and over incarcerate and build prisons, but we're not holding up our end of the bargain as a state. It'd be different if the state was doing all the right things, but we all know that's not true, and it's never been true.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would go further. It's not only resources the state or any government organization can provide or support those individuals with, but it's also our community and our perspective on the human level as well. We have so many people who don't believe they're affected, or they don't understand what degree they're affected, or they're just judgmental. I mean, imagine having a record of any kind and you apply for a job and you don't even get past the first round, or you get past the first round as a technicality because they have to. We need to make sure that people understand these are people. They are not ex-convicts. They're not, someone that should not define them in the rest of their lives. And they should have the same opportunities and the support and the help from the people around them, not just financially, but just as a social group.
For sure. And people always ask, what is needed to change, the thinking or the votes around criminal justice reform and how we address as a state. And I think a big part of it has to be a changing of the minds in society.
I agree.
We have to get people to stop thinking that just because somebody commits an offense that they're horrible people and we should throw them away and drop the key in the ocean and say forget them. Because what people don't understand is 90+% of those individuals that go to prison are coming back to society. And if we're not doing what we're supposed to do to help ensure that when they come back out that they're not going back, we're going to keep spinning the wheels and continuing the cycle. And I tell people about my story all the time, and that I came back home and I had misdemeanors on my record, and I would get to the third interview and last of two candidates left at some jobs and wouldn't get the job because of that. Essentially, that would be the excuse to say no to me about, whether or not I could be employed. And that's, one of the things that always stuck with me is the way things are set up like that, and how people say, oh, we care, but when it's time to actually care, they don't, it's not reflective in their actions.
Well, I agree. There's a saying I used to tell some of my staff, I care, but not enough. And I think that, it's very unfortunate, but we're working to change the mindset and awareness and just really create a conversation around some of those topics. Justin has joined us, my partner in podcast. Justin, do you want to say hello?
Hi, nice to meet you, Senator McKinney.
Hi, nice to meet you as well.
We were just chatting about LB.
Excellent. Thank you for having me late. I'm sorry, work got in the way.
As it does. Yeah. We were just chatting about LB 1024. And I would really love to segue a little bit, some of the discussion points you have, kind of changing the mindset and the understanding in the community. Maybe discuss some of the LB 980. I know this is one that I really care about. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So LB 980, I decided to introduce it for two big reasons. One was towards the end of the session last year, I had, became aware of a situation where a young man was dealing with a terminal illness. He had developed a tumor while locked up, and his family was trying to figure out a way to get him released so he could spend his last days with the family. And once I got involved in that, it just was like, this is so frustrating. It was dealing with the parole board and the Department of Corrections, and they wouldn't essentially release him because he wasn't within 2 years of his parole eligibility date, which is an arbitrary rule. In the first, right. It's not a law. It's just y'all. So that was the issue, and then trying to figure out, like, how do we get him home? And I went and visited NSP one day, and I was able to visit him. And when I was leaving, he stopped me and was like, "Hey, do you think I'm gonna die in here?" And I was like, that kind of hit me, and I really didn't know how to answer the question. I was just like, just keep fighting. And he didn't end up being able to get sent home or released home because of just the politics of it. Nobody wanted to say yes, or nobody felt like they had the authority to do so. And then it was a doctor that one day said he was terminally ill, then the next day he not terminally ill, which makes no sense. But and then the other part of it was visiting the prisons and going to NSP and having, discussions with the circle of concerned lifers. And, I was, talking to them, talking to staff, and just going in and really getting a good perspective on those that are serving long-term sentences are some of the best people inside. Absolutely. They're the peer mentors. They're doing all the right things. They're taking all the programming. And essentially, they have life sentences. They're not incentivized to do any of that because, right. But they're doing it because they want to make some changes in their lives and want to set an example not only for themselves but for the younger individuals coming in. So they approached me about trying to find a way to get around the constitutional argument around whether the legislature could do something about, somebody serving a life term. And the way around it really pretty much is, you look at our state's constitution, it says the only things that make you not eligible for parole are treason and impeachment. It doesn't say life. So that honestly, the parole board should be reviewing cases of people that are serving life terms. And that's why, I introduced 980. I combined both. And, we had a good hearing, and I've been trying to get it to the floor and trying to get, people to vote on it. I don't know if we'll be able to get it passed this year, but it's definitely something that I'll keep introducing until it's passed, because I think it definitely needs to happen.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree. There was an edition of the unicameral update from January 28th of this year. And Jason Whitmer was provided some testimony during that hearing. And he explained, they are some of the most upstanding people. They're the people you want to associate with when you're serving time. They just give you knowledge. And to quote him, he said that they educate themselves and they reach out to the destructive lost boys, I think is how he phrased it. And he said that he was made a neighbor you'd want to have by those people he served time with. And I think that really hits home for me. My grandfather is serving 2 consecutive life sentences. He has very serious health problems. And we were very hopeful hearing about the bill. There's a shred of hope. He is a very changed person. He actually went through one of the programs with one of his victims' wives, and she talked about how great of a person he was on one of her own interviews on local television a number of years back. And so it really, hearing that in legislation, even if it hasn't passed, even if it hasn't been voted on, I think is really impactful to people for so many different reasons from so many different backgrounds. It's not something people think about. You get life in prison and you are just kind of forgotten about after a while, especially when you're there for 30 plus years. Your family is slowly dwindling. If you weren't forgotten, you're kind of in the background in their mind, so I think it's so meaningful and impactful to see that it's even being discussed right now. So I know we really appreciate that bill, especially.
For sure.
Justin, how did you feel communicating with people who had life sentences while you were serving time?
Well, I definitely agree with you as far as they're the kind of people you want to associate with in prison. It's always kind of, the more time you have, the more respect you get in that world. And while that's not really necessarily true out here, looking back on things, it definitely felt that way in there. You wanted to associate with people who were there more long term because they gave you, obviously they've made it so, as far as they have, because of their conduct. And we always have said, the respect is the number one currency in prison. And I definitely think that that's how I learned how to interact with people, was just based on the respect level that those kind of people, and those people that have served, 30 something years in the feds, they were some of the more respectful, soft-spoken, calm individuals I've ever met. And I know, I personally had a couple of very good friends that were released when Obama, with clemency from Obama, as well as from the First Step Act that Trump signed into order. That also got a lot of people out. But really, particularly Obama and the amount of clemency that he gave, I would love to see that on the state level. And that's, I think, the best way to look, at the bill that he introduced, that the senator introduces, because that is, providing that option. There's no clemency that the governor ever does on the state level, at least in Nebraska. We have a very, I would just go out and say it, a very unfriendly governor towards criminal justice reform and anything like this. And so, I think that having, more public support is going to make a huge difference.
I agree with you. And before you got on, I was saying a big part of, the shift for more changes in the criminal justice system. I think we got to shift the minds of the public and get them to understand that, yes, you hold somebody accountable, but that doesn't mean you just overdo it. There's
you cripple them forever.
Right. There has to be a line, because if we keep up the way we're going to keep building prisons. We're going to keep having these issues, and they're never going to get solved.
Right. And it's interesting that Nebraska's approach is to just build another prison when they can't staff the prisons that they have. They can't continue to offer, I know that, I believe it's 4 days a week that your average inmate is out on the state level, and the rest of the time they're locked down because they don't have the ability to watch them. Yeah. And I mean, it's ridiculous that we would even consider. I mean, the amount of people that are sentenced every day to state prison is staggering in Nebraska. And there has to be another way, another route, because I'm sorry, I've been to both the state and the federal level. Incarceration did not change me. You know, incarceration did not help me be a better person. It didn't change, you know, the criminal aspect of my mentality at the time. Like, that has to come from within. That has to come from people believing in me and people building me up and giving me the, not giving me, but helping me earn the opportunities that I need in order to be successful. And I found that incarceration was a giant waste of time and talent. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for it in some ways. I mean, I don't think we'll ever be rid of the whole concept, but I think that something has got to change, or else, I mean, people are just never going to change. If nothing changes, nothing changes. That was one of the best things that was ever, you know, said to me.
Right. And I was having a discussion because we had a meeting about LB 920 the other day, and I was telling the governor and some other people that y'all have to look at it from a holistic perspective. You guys are, every time y'all talk about the worst situation possible. And that's not the majority. It's like, yeah, like, let's be honest here. It's never going to be perfect. It's nothing we can ever do to make nobody not commit a crime. Let's throw that off the table. But if you focus on that one person that does something horrible, then you punish a bunch of other people that don't need to be punished because you're thinking about this one person.
Right.
And that's the one thing. It's like, oh, we're gonna be soft on crime if we do this. It's like, no, you're not. You're gonna be smart.
Smart on crime.
I love that. Yes. Yeah.
And then they like talk about like, then on other topics, just like, oh, let's save the taxpayers money. Let's be fiscally responsible. And I'm like, but you're not being fiscally responsible with the criminal justice system. You're not
at all.
You're overspending. You keep spending. You want to keep building, and you're not getting a return on your investment.
Nothing is changing. Nothing is benefiting them. Like, I don't get it either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if they're worried about being fiscally responsible, it's kind of like investing in something, right? You need to spend the money in order to gain the interest and the return back from it, right? Society is the same way, especially in situations like this. We have to invest in creating a better support system, a better foundation for people, and then they won't be going back to prison. We won't have to keep spending money on it. And slowly the funds needed to support that will be decreased over time. So why wouldn't we invest in that, have a better society and community during and at the end of it, but also get away with some of what we do spend just an inordinate amount of money on, not just as taxpayers, but think about the families of people serving time. And I forget the exact number. I looked it up last year, I think it was, and we linked it on our website, but it's staggering. It's in the billions across the state. And that's just on the family. That's not including anyone who's actually serving time paying for their own. So that's why would we continue to do that? Then you're putting more people in debt. You're putting people out of a job because they can't make transportation. They can't pay for the bus. I mean, it snowballs so quickly. It creates the problem itself. Yeah. So fiscally responsible, that's one of my pet peeves as an argument. It drives me crazy. Are there any other bills you'd like to discuss from this session?
There's a couple. So we're in negotiations now on LB 920, which originated from the CJI process. The Crime Justice Institute came into the state. The governor, Senator Steve Lathrop, and Chief Justice Havoc invited them in to look at our state, evaluate our system with data, and try to help guide us through a process of finding some options to address our criminal justice system. We met pretty much all summer, and at the end in December, we came up with 21 options. 17 of the options everybody agreed on, and then there were 4 that we didn't get, everybody to agree on, which was geriatric parole, looking at mandatory minimums, trying to figure out a way to fix how consecutive sentences are used. And the 4th was, I forget the 4th. I think it was the fourth was, it's slipping my brain right now, but because of the 4 consensus items, we've been just going back and forth arguing. And my biggest thing with the other side to that is, okay, you disagree with those, offer up a better solution. Don't just say no. Like I hate when people just say no, I don't like this. It's like, okay, you don't like it, but the data shows that we have to address this issue. So how do you plan to address this issue? You can't just stand up and say, no, this is bad, or we're going to be soft on crime. You can't ignore the data unless you just want to ignore the data, and just say that. Just say, like, I hate the data, I hate what we found, or say, hey, I saw you guys propose this to address this issue. I don't agree with it, but here's a better way that we can probably meet in the middle on this. And that's been my approach, because I know where we're at. We're in the state of Nebraska, a super conservative state. I'm not in a fairy tale world where we're on the East Coast and we got it, or, somewhere else. So I know we might not get what I really want, but how can we get to something that we all could walk away and say we got something?
Yeah. And I think that's such a big thing in politics, and I'm glad that you brought it up. Too much, it is just yay or nay, and there's no happy medium or something, and we might have to compromise and give a little bit on both sides in order to make something happen. And I'm so glad that you bring that up, and that you speak to that, when you're in session, when you're with these people, is, there is a third option, and it's, not just yes or no. There's other options, and if you bring them to the table, then perhaps we'll get somewhere. Because the biggest thing for me is, I know when I was in the very first week I was in, I heard, well, this is changing, this is changing, this is changing. Your sentences, you're only going to do 65%. I think they've been saying that since like 1989 in the feds, and it's never the case. It's never going to be 65%. Like, I mean, it might at some point get there, but at this point, it's still not there, because it has to go through so many different things before it can even get there. Somebody can say that they want to, present this, but then it doesn't happen because it gets dropped along the way, or it gets, vetoed by this or that. I know that for me, it was such a discouraging thing to hear all the time. Because you have somebody like you who is championing for people like me, and for the people that I was incarcerated with. But they've been hearing this for a long time, and they've been hearing a lot of hope, and then every year the hope gets crushed, and eventually people just stop hoping, for any kind of change or for any kind of relief. There's people doing 15 years in the feds for a couple bullets. I mean, I know that you're not on the federal side, but I mean, this is a reality. Like, and these people just get forgotten about because of one court over another court, just railroads them into it. And it's so discouraging to see and to hear all of those things, and for nothing to ever get done about it. And that's the one thing I just wanted to bring up, was just like, what are you doing as far as like, how sure, I mean, I know you can't be 100% sure of anything really, until it's voted on and approved, but, how do you go into these things knowing that, this is really what my intent is to make a difference. This is what our chances are, before you even kind of move forward, how do you even approach that? What are you going to platform on, with your, I guess with your campaigns and with your position?
So 2 things. So when I talk to people that are inside, I tell them, like, look, I can't make you a promise.
Right.
It's gonna be a battle, but I'm gonna fight for you. You just at the end of the day, I'm gonna fight for you. Outside of that, I know where I'm at. And I'm not gonna sell you a big dream and say I'm gonna introduce this bill and this is gonna happen. It's like I try to be as realistic as possible. And then when I introduce something like 980, for example, I just try to come in with as many facts as possible just to neutralize the other side and get them to at least open up their minds. I know if you keep working on somebody over time, it might not happen this year, it might not happen next year, But if I keep working, bringing the facts and sticking to and countering everything they say, I tell people that come, opposed to my bills, I thank you for coming, because now that I got why you're opposed to this, I'm going to relook at my bill and fix it. And then I want to see if you're still going to come up opposed. And I say that to the cops. I was like, it doesn't matter what I do to fix this bill. I know y'all going to come in opposition just because y'all are unreasonable. So it is what it is. You know what I mean? They're going to come in and fear monger and say the world is going to end if this law changes and we're going to have all these dangerous people on the streets.
Because it affects their bottom line at the end of the day, too.
Right. It's like, no, it's not. And just because we allow somebody to be able to have a parole review doesn't guarantee they're going to get out like that. And if you look at what's happening with our parole board in the state of Nebraska, you go to a parole board now, you might see 2 or 3 people. So it's not guaranteed, but they just come and say, we're trying to like let all these horrible people out. And then I just look at them, it's like, okay. And I said this in the meeting, and somebody inside said this to me. It was like, the problem is they all think everybody is Nico Jenkins. But they tell us not to for the police to not look at all them as Derek Chauvin.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I said
that's a really good point.
Y'all don't want us to look at y'all as him, but y'all view everybody that gets locked up as Nico. And then they would leave out the point that they created Nico. He was in solitary. He had the mental health issues. He asked for help, and instead of giving him help, they just released him to the streets.
Yep. I know that Dr. Oliveto, who actually was treating him, specifically said, we can't let him out because he needs help in this, that, and the other, and they fired him. They fired Dr. Oliveto. He works for my mom now.
Yeah. So kind of along those wavelengths, the politicians who do put forward some reform bills, do you feel they really stand behind and are motivated to embrace these changes, or is it more of a social platform? What's been your experience working with some of your colleagues, just in general, how you feel about
it? I think some of them have good intentions. I don't know if all of them fully grasp it, but I won't say they like just doing it for political relevance or something. But, I think some of them have well-meaning intentions and, kind of are starting to get it when you have conversations with them. The more, the more we talk about it and kind of dig through the nuances of it, a lot more people are beginning to get it. The issue is politics. And the fact that a big issue why it's hard to get a criminal justice reform passed this year is it's an election year. Nobody wants that Miller, the cop saying ex-senator voted to allow criminals out on the streets. So we're dealing with that too. It's like there's people that have come up and say, I understand what you're saying and I get it, but I just can't do it because, I'm running for office, or I'm re-election or something like that, and they don't want to catch any negative pub. And I would tell them, and I always tell them, no, I got an easy counter to that. I voted to be smart on criminal justice. I voted to save the state money. I voted to all these other things. And that's the issue. It's like, are you really just saying, is that just an easy scapegoat to say you don't want to do it, or do you really want to do it? Because if you really want to do it, I think you could come up with a well thought out argument of why you voted a certain way.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, well, that's a lot. I don't envy you. I do want to touch on though. So it turns out you are no stranger to podcasts. I was looking for some information and I found that you've had a podcast of your own, right?
Yeah, I did. I did one for like a few years. I did a couple years. Podcast with Willie Hamilton. And I stopped doing it once I started running for office because it didn't have the time. But I did.
Too many things could get you into trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I did listen to some of your episodes. It's brilliant content. So bravo to you guys. Wow. One topic I really appreciated you touching on, though, was how you need to create change on a local basis first. And one example you gave was the contracts with law enforcement in the city. Is that something you'd like to touch on real quick? We only have a handful of minutes left, but I think it's really good information.
I think one thing that gets lost when we talk about the changes that need to happen with the police is every, I think, 4 or 5 years, their contract comes back up.
Mm-hmm.
And and the last time it came up, people really didn't pay attention like I thought they should have. But the reason they get away with so much is because of these contracts. And the reason why, qualified immunity and all these other things, or how they get fired and all these other things, it's in the contract. So it creates an inherent issue. So if an officer does something, they could appeal it and get back on the streets. Like, for example, the Zachary Bearhill situation, 3 of those officers are back out on the streets right now. They got fired, but because of the contract and arbitration and all that, they were able to just go back to work. And, police reform, people, the problem with police reform, I think, is too much hero worship that goes on with police. Mm-hmm. And everybody looks at them as heroes and they can't do nothing wrong. And another part is, I think we have to hit them on multiple angles. And one of those angles is the contract. And I think, a big way to hold them more accountable is to fix the contract situation, to get language in there that is more forceful to hold them accountable. But currently,
where do you even start with that?
It's with the city council.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the city, they vote on it. So that's a place to say, and the crazy part, which is why politics is like, I have a lot of issues, is, for example, we have a Democratic majority city council, but we don't have the political willingness to. Too many people are so scared of the police lobby that they just go along. And me, for example, I don't care. Like, a senator one day was like, yeah, we know Senator McKinney hates the police. I was like, you're not wrong. I don't think we'll ever agree with each other, but I have my reasons, and I have legit reasons why I disagree with a lot of stuff. It's not because it's been happening my whole life. So I have valid reasons why I don't like them. They even ran a mailer on me when I was running, so it is what it is. I'm not scared of them. Like, when they come to the judiciary, I press them on issues and topics. And that's where I think a lot of people are hesitant to, push them on some things. I'm not saying like every cop is horrible, but in my opinion, you can't say there are good cops when good cops stand by and watch people get killed.
Mm-hmm.
Don't speak up about it. I don't find good in that. Because just like they would want me or you to say, if our friend killed somebody, y'all should expect the same from each other. Don't come to our community and say, we want y'all to basically tell on somebody who do something wrong. Don't offer you no protection, no protection from your family. So if you go tell on this person, and somebody go burn down your mama's house, they're not there to help you financially, but they want you, but they don't want to step out and say, Officer so-and-so was wrong in, punching somebody or shooting somebody. They don't want to do that. It's like this blue wall of silence. Then they come and tell you to stop snitching. It don't make sense.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. Wow. We're about to get cut off, so I am so sorry, but we have really appreciated your time with us, and we would love to chat with you again if you're ever available or want to get back on the air. Let us know. Justin, do you have any questions? Yeah, mine too.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a good day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.